I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam, filling in for Allie today.
And it's kind of awkward to do this on video, but welcome to the You've Heard It Said podcast. And whose turn is it?
Oh, you just made this.
Okay, new rule. Sorry, Blair. New rule.
Yeah.
Take from the middle, and your eyes have to be closed.
Okay.
No, that's not it.
Yeah, you got it. You're good.
Thought I could just push it out. Okay.
Okay, well, that's a good way to start a conversation about doubt and working out your faith, right?
Yeah, this is great. So today we're talking about what it looks like to find faith after experiencing doubt. And Katie, I know we got to talk a few days ago. You were telling me about some experiences that you've had in your life that have caused some serious doubts about God. So can you tell us a little bit about your story and what brought you to this space where you had some really significant doubts?
Yeah, so this was like 2.5 years ago. I was 21 years old, and I was working for this Christian conference tour that it's like a 5-day tour where kids can come and like learn who Jesus is and learn the love of Jesus, and we were doing all this stuff. And so we were traveling from one location to the next, and we were stopped on the highway, and we were like the last car in like a huge line of vehicles just stopped for traffic. And behind us, a semi was going 80 miles an hour. He was texting and driving, so he didn't see that we were stopped. And one thing led to another and caused the largest accident to ever happen in the state of Kentucky's history. 28 cars were in the accident, 18 people were hospitalized, 8 people were airlifted, including myself. And from my knowledge, about 4 people died. And so out of like the people in my car that did survive, I had the most injuries, meaning that I broke every single bone in my body except for one of my legs. Yeah. And so that led to a series of 12 surgeries that I was put under for. And then I had back surgery that I had to be awake for every other day for 2.5 months because I needed to know when they're hitting live nerve. And so after the total of like 42 surgeries, I was in physical therapy for about 2 years because I never thought, like, it was a huge question of like, will she walk again? Will she have normal brain function again? Like everything about my life was just a really big question mark for a really, really long time. And so like from all of that happening, I mean, you can imagine the questions that come of like, if God is so good, why am I in this hospital bed? If God is so good, why may I never be able to walk again? If God is so good, why is my friend dead? And so yeah, that transaction of my life caused a lot of questions of God's faithfulness and God's character.
So 2 years of physical therapy, this is fresh.
Yeah.
And this is very recent.
Yeah, so a year ago, like last March, so March of 2021 was the last time I was in physical therapy.
Okay. Wow. So, Blair, when we talked, your story was pretty different.
Yeah.
But also compelling, interesting. And talk to us about specifically when you got to that place of wondering about your faith, working out your faith. What were some of the things that helped you to realize you were there? Like, how did you know you were there? And get us there first.
Yeah. So when we had talked the other day, you'd use the language of unraveling. And that was the perfect way to describe it. Because, you know, I had been in ministry for a little while. I had been involved in church and had a relationship with Jesus. And the longer you walk with Jesus, sometimes you can kind of start to get this sense of like comfortability. And it's like, I know who I am. I know how I relate to God and what that looks like played out in my life. And it literally felt like a comfy sweater, right? Like I know who I am. I kind of know where I'm headed. And I found myself kind of started like pulling at some of the threads, right? Asking questions. It started with myself, but then I was in a life group where we were just asking those questions of like, what does it look like to follow God? What are the implications of this? Even things like, how do we read scripture? And I found myself pulling, and it's kind of a scary place because I had been in a kind of a comfortable place for a little while, right? And I just found myself pulling and pulling and pulling. And then I got to the point to where it was really uncomfortable. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to unravel myself out of a job? having been in ministry, right? Am I going to ask too many questions? Like, am I going to unravel myself out of church, out of faith? Even in my marriage, we had so much congruence in what we believed. And I started to get to this point to where I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know how far this is going to go, right? And there were some things that I felt like I was pulling. But then, and I don't know if you've ever experienced this, it felt like there were some things that were being pulled for me.
Yeah,
and
like
so,
someone's changing the rules on you.
A little bit, and then what's happening in the world and circumstantially. So our son had been born really early. He was in the NICU, and he was just so small. And he was struggling to breathe, but we were able to take him home. But then COVID hit, right? And so then I asked myself the question of, I have somebody vulnerable in my house, right? I watched him struggle to breathe 3 months ago. He's so little. How do I take care of the vulnerable in light of this situation, but also other situations, right? And then also, like, our household is Black, Latino, and white. So how do I navigate that as a believer? And how does the church navigate that? And these felt like big threads that were being pulled for me. These weren't necessarily threads that I was pulling, given everything that was going on. I felt like these were being pulled for me. And I found like this comfy sweater that I felt like I could trust and I had was tattered and uncomfortable, and I felt vulnerable. And it was a scary period. And I found myself a lot of times like knowing God was there, but I didn't really want to keep pulling, like I didn't like that feeling of uncomfortability. It was challenging.
Yeah, that brings up a question just in my brain right now of like, let's imagine like we're pulling, right? What are we afraid that we're pulling on? What are we afraid we might happen? Like, what's the fear? I'm curious to hear from any of us, Sam or anybody.
Kind of what Blair was saying, that there's this feeling that maybe my friendships will look different if I begin to believe different things, or if this doubt ends up pulling my whole faith apart. Can impact our relationships, it impacts our emotions. And so there's a real fear of loss that comes with doubt. I like the sweater analogy. You start with a sweater and you end up just holding a ball of yarn in your hand. You're like, okay, what is this now?
Right.
How does this go back together?
Yeah. And should it?
Yeah.
In the way that it was.
Yeah.
And how will it look different?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, what would you say, when you're starting, you said you get to this point where you're questioning God. What do you think you might have been afraid of to keep questioning?
I think like along the same lines of like when you're involved in your faith so much prior, you build your life kind of around this firm foundation of like, but that firm foundation is not just like Jesus. It's also like the community that he gives you, your family, and like how you guys all like work to build something together. And so it is like, if I start to question this, like let's say I find stuff that like I'm not certain in anymore, what does that mean for literally everything that I have built around myself? Like, that comfortability is just like gone, because like everything that you've built is gone.
Yeah.
So when you're in those places, and either of you, I'd love to hear your answers to this, is when you're in this place of doubt and you're in this place of fear or anxiety about your faith, who are some helpful people in your life, and maybe what are some of the things that they said or did that helped you move through doubt in a healthy way?
I know for me, God was really gracious about it, because before all of this, I was actually in a life group where we started asking questions that felt really fringe at the time and started expressing doubts that we hadn't talked about, but I had a safe place to just process through those things and ask through those questions. And it wasn't just a space to ask the questions, but we were given resources, passages in scripture to look into. And it felt like it was really cool, because as I was just really, I guess to use the analogy of pulling the string, it was creating space to know God more. And so what was really cool is I was given resources and had relationships to still get to know God more. And while there were days that it was really hard, that there was a gap and I didn't know what was next, I felt God in that gap. Yeah. And through the friendships, and a lot of it was resources, through the teachings, through the Bible, I was able to see like, oh, this is who God actually is. Like if I'm willing to set this down for just a second, through community, I was able to work with friends and read through scripture and figure out like, oh man, Jesus is incredible. And this is actually the Jesus that I've known all along. I actually just now have space to see him, right?
So, Blair, awesome. I'm curious because you said resources a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you just to tell me a few of what were the resources.
Yeah.
But another question, you also said you found yourself in a safe place to ask questions or share. Yeah. How do you know it was safe? Because I think a lot of people listening or watching might be thinking, but yeah, I'm in one of those groups, or I've got family who are following Jesus, but I don't feel like I can talk to them. Yeah. So how do you know it was safe, and what were some of the resources?
Wow, those are really good questions. So I knew it was safe, one, because it was explicitly said. The leader of the group was like, hey, like, we're gonna talk about things that maybe aren't comfortable to talk about, and just as brothers, we're gonna trust that, we're not gonna share this outside of this room. We're just gonna process through this together. But then also some of the questions that other people were asking, it was some of the same ones that I had, and that sense of familiarity, and it's like, oh, we're on the same page here. I think that helped. And then there was a sense of resolution, right? It wasn't just like a sense of like, we're just trying to bash or we're just trying to be negative, but it was like, no, our goal here is to know Jesus more. And that made me also trust the intent of the group, which made me feel a little bit safer,
Yeah.
As far as resources, the first one was Bema, which blew my mind, the
What's
podcast.
Bema?
So it's a podcast that talks through and breaks down Scripture, and it breaks it down, the themes of Scripture, how to read it, and even the connecting points to other pieces in Scripture, right? So I'm really grateful that Scripture was the foundation that I started on. Another person that was really beneficial was N.T. Wright, hearing his teachings and the way that he would process through things. And then as far as like lifestyle, right? Like, okay, this is Jesus. We believe this is true, but what does this mean for your life?
Yeah.
John Mark Comer had laid out just kind of like what felt like a game plan to me, and the game plan felt really refreshing. So those were life-changing for me and for my family too.
I think for me, like I had such like a severe situation that like when someone like my mom or my brother and people who shared my faith with me, like when they were in the room, a lot of the concern was like, how do we fix her? Like, how do we make things better? Because like every single day there was a multitude, like a list of things that had to get done in order for me to survive. Because like my life was very touch and go for like 3 months. And so like, though I love them and they were people I know that I could trust, like their priorities were elsewhere. Like, how do we just like get her to the next day? Like, how does she go on? And so someone that came in for me was actually my friend's mom, who like, she was just a safe person to be like, I don't know like what's going on. Like, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't understand what is going on. And she was a really safe person to like, she didn't see my doubt and get really scared for me. Like she saw my doubt and she didn't preach Jesus to me, but she was Jesus in the sense of like, she held my hand and she wept with me and she grieved with me for like everything I had lost. Cause like when your life just turns in the blink of an eye, like no one can expect something like that or like that severe of a tragedy to happen. So there's so much to grieve in such little time. And so like she wasn't trying to like force a bunch of like rules and like, oh, well, you have to believe in Jesus because like if you don't, like what's gonna happen tomorrow? Which is like, it's such a scary thought, but like it was a very real thought.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask you the same question I asked Blair, like how did you know they were safe? But I feel like you answered it already. It was just how she treated you. Yeah, she gave you space to doubt. She listened. She was physically and tangibly very much there. Yes. And hurt with you. It sounds like she was hurting with you.
Yeah, it was very empathetic.
I don't know if you have an answer to this. It's okay if you don't. But like if you were to try to guess what made her that way, like how did she get to the point where she could love you that way? Like what are your guesses?
I don't think she had the easiest life growing up. And so I think she had experienced things where like maybe not in the same vein of like hospitalization and medical things, but I think she had seen a thing or two in her life where she knew that it wasn't easy, but she had seen like the evidence that God has done something before for her and God will do something in the future. And so I think when you have certain things to lean on of like, God has done this before and I know he can do it again. And so when you just bring that wisdom into it with you, it offers a posture of peace for the other person.
So looking back to your pre-doubt selves, what does your faith look like now that's different? Like if you could go back in time to talk to yourself before you experienced that life-changing doubt, what would you tell What would you tell that past version of yourself?
You can go.
I would just say that as things come up, like with anything, God's going to be there with you. And that is one of the things as people have processed through doubt that I wish that I would have heard over and over and over again. And it's in scripture, right? But I wish I could have been reminded over and over and over again that God's going to be with you. Like as you question expressions of your faith, as you question certain things, as you feel certain things, he's there with you. And if there's gaps where you don't know what's next, he's actually there with you. And he can use that space where you're seeking him to just get to experience him deeper. Like he wants us to know him. And if we want to know him, we will experience him. And there were days that felt easy to remember, but there were some days that felt really hard, that God wanted to be known and wanted to be with me.
I think you hear a lot of times, I had a mentor tell me this one time, like when you hear like really big scenarios of like, and people, once things finally kind of come to a resolve, they're like, God really showed up, you know, like God really showed up for me there. And it's like, he was always there for you. Like maybe your advantage point just wasn't necessarily centered. And so like knowing what I do now about my faith, like God was always there for me. It was just a matter of like me being open to it. And so, I know now like God will fight for you and God will keep you and he will sustain you. You just have to like look for those moments that he shows up, and you have to be aware of like what's going on around you.
I have to admit, Katie, you saying that feels kind of like crazy. That's the best word I can think of.
Why is that?
Because of what you went through. Like, so how do you get to the point where you can, like where you have been through what you've been through, which I can never imagine. And you have that much confidence that God, you're saying, you would say this to other people, God's been there with you all along. Like, how did you get to that point?
I think being able to look back, like hindsight is always 20/20, like that's like a really big saying, you know? And so like being able to see like these concrete moments that I saw God just like do miracles, like being able to look back and have that evidence of like one of my occupational therapists wasn't a Christian or anything like that, but one of her coworkers, and I was like, you should really just come to, at the time, like our home church, like you should just check it out and stuff like that. And sure enough, when I got out of the hospital, like who was in the front row? She was. And like, so I see that. And then I see how like there were moments that I should not be alive. Like there's no reason for me to be here, but like seeing how God had placed certain doctors and surgeons and like world-class surgeons just happened to be at the hospital I was at when I got airlifted. Like there's so much evidence of where God has been that it's like, if you just take the time to open your eyes and have a broader scope to see, like he's there, you just got to pay attention. And so being open to that evidence and just seeing him for who he is. And it's like, he's amazing. And yeah, you'll see him if you look for him.
Sam, you're good at like seeing themes. What are some of the themes you're seeing in the conversation?
Well, both of your stories are really different. And I think that's true of all of us. We all have different experiences of faith and God, and obviously the source of your doubt is really different. But there's a lot that seems like it's the same. For both of you, there was a process involved. There wasn't one single conversation or one single Bible verse that immediately resolved all your doubts. It was in the context of getting to see God work in your life, of having other people in your life who could help you and provide that safe space for you. And so it took time. And I think that can be helpful for anyone dealing with doubt to know that it can take time, and that's okay. It's okay to walk through this, and that God will meet you in your doubt, and He'll help you find the right places and the right people to bring you into a place of confidence. So
there's process. You need people. I hear all of us saying that. And give yourself some time. I think as we think about this, and as people are listening or watching, I hope they'll start a conversation like this one. And I hope they'll ask a question that's something like, who are the people that you need to be able to talk to about this? You shared about some people. I'm thinking of people. Who are the people that you need to be able to talk to about this? And what's one thing, like just one thing that you can hold on to? Like one thing that you won't let go of, at least for a while, because we all need something to hold on to, right? So what will you hold on to? Blair, I heard you say scripture. I heard you say, Katie, Jesus. But I think it could be different. It could be different for different people, but what's something you can hold on to?
That's good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and talking with us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.